Hi everyone, I am Jan Hofmeyr, the Vice President here at EC2 Edge for AWS. And great to be here with you today, and I'm joined by Elias. Elias, welcome.
Thank you for having me. My name is Elias Khnaser. I'm the Chief of Research for EK Media Group. I'm an independent analyst, and I was a former Gartner Research Vice President. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So Eli, let's start off with, I'm just curious to see if you have seen customer interest in using cloud infrastructure and services to run their applications in their on-premise and edge environments. What have you seen?
Most of the customers I talk to have a significant interest in this. For many years, customers have tried to do this using private cloud technologies, and for a variety of reasons, especially operational, the success has been extremely limited. So now that the cloud provider, AWS in this particular instance, is going cloud out, on premises and to the edge, customers like that like-for-like technology, that seamless single pane of glass type of management and operation. Again, unifying the on-premises user experience with the cloud user experience and the edge. So we're seeing a lot of that, a lot of interest from customers. But I'd be curious also from an AWS perspective, does that sound like something that you're also seeing?
No, absolutely. From our side, we have a lot of applications running in our regions, but we definitely see use cases where the cloud would benefit from running in the edge, and really driven by requirements like low latency, data residency, low data processing. And we frequently hear from our customers that how can we bring the AWS infrastructure closer to the edge for them to run that, and make that a seamless experience, from the cloud to the edge, so that they can run their applications closer to their users, closer to within their data centers, their smart factories, and so on. So we definitely see a need for that. Many of these use cases are driven by latency and local data processing, but we also see requirements of strict data residency that requires our customers to run their applications and their workloads in very specific locations. So clearly we are seeing a strong signal from customers for use cases running in the edge. So how are you seeing customers using hybrid and edge solutions today? What often drives these use cases, and are you seeing any growing trends?
Great question. So a lot of the things you mentioned we're seeing. So for example, low latency is a big use case, right? So especially for things that are hard to move to the cloud, like an AS400. Sometimes when you're trying to modernize an AS400, you're taking some of its components, maybe you're containerizing them, maybe they're virtual machines, etc. But oftentimes you're not able to make the whole migration, right? So maybe bringing something like an AS400 more cloud adjacent, closer to the cloud. That's where low latency tends to be a really strong use case. So would you agree? Is that something that is also from a customer perspective?
No, absolutely. I think the whole enterprise migration and modernization, if you look at some of these large enterprise migrations, they have a very large footprint with latency-sensitive system interdependencies between these systems, and which makes it very difficult for them to modernize one piece and move it to the cloud, right? So they have those dependencies, and I think the opportunity of bringing like an outpost on-premise, which means you bring the AWS cloud on-premise into the data center, allows them to modernize in place and start breaking those dependencies, so that they can then systematically modernize their application, refactor the application, and eventually potentially even move it into the region, into the cloud. So we're definitely seeing that as a very important use case.
Yeah, I mean, another one that comes up a lot is data residency, so security, all that conversation. And that comes up a lot, especially in countries where they want the data to remain on premises. It has to be within country. Those are use cases that are very popular. Local processing we're seeing as well, that's becoming very popular. Something like the local zones would be very helpful for customers. I'm talking on AWS's behalf here, but those are some of the use cases that are coming up, especially for movie studios that are trying to render these large movies. That becomes something that is important. Another one that I see, and I'd be curious your perspective on it, oftentimes, especially, for example, in financial institutions, they require some kind of an exit strategy. Their regulators will dictate having an exit strategy. And this seems to be one of those use cases where it checks the mark, right? Especially if you're containerized, if you're heavily virtualized, you're able to say, should I need to operate solely on premises, I can do that. Would you agree?
First of all, yeah, absolutely. We previously spoke about the enterprise migration, which is a really important use case. But then, as you said, there's the use case that's really driven by regulations. A great example would be, what we've done with in real money gaming, which is a regulated industry where the license to operate is issued by state in the U.S. And so that requires them to run their application in the state in which the transaction is performed. That's a great use case of a regulation where they really needed the cloud in every state in the US. So that was a great example of how we can bring the cloud to the states through using Outpost. And in some cases where we have local zones, they can leverage local zones for that. On the government and regulated workloads from a government perspective, we have our dedicated clouds in our regions, specifically for government workloads and very, very sensitive workloads. You can imagine how for those customers and those use cases, you can also take an Outpost and connect it or hone it into one of those zones so that the government can also run in specific locations where they need to process that. So imagine an Outpost in a different country coming into a region that is honed for government workloads. So we're definitely seeing the regulations as an important one. And then you mentioned about the exit there a little bit, and I think that for the workloads to be able to run in specific locations and then be able to move around, is really important.
Yeah, the portability of the applications, the use cases, it's extremely important. Another one that I see a lot, especially with some of the recent announcements that we've seen, is AR/VR headsets. Those are incredibly becoming popular, and I think we're going to see more and more of them in the future, which is going to require more edge infrastructure to be built to support them. Low latency comes into play, and especially data residency, because again, you're generating a lot of this data. So from an AWS perspective, is that something that's on the radar? Is that something you guys are supporting?
Yeah, I had a question for you as well, and you kind of went there already with the kind of the trends here, right? And what we are seeing, and VR and headsets are definitely it's in the news. It's been around for a while, and I think that the technology is evolving fast. I think it's one of those great edge use cases where you're going to have a huge amount of data processing on the headset itself that needs to be offloaded because of latencies to something very close by, which I think positions the edge very well for that use case. So I think there's going to be a lot of use of the edge and edge compute in the form of local zones and even Outpost deeper in the network to support that use case. We're also seeing similar use cases than DR as new use cases in the 5G network. There's really three big things we are seeing happening there. Is the first one on 5G, we've spoken a lot about what we've done in collaboration with Dish of building a complete 5G network natively in the cloud. But we are also seeing more and more customers looking for disaster recovery, and leveraging the cloud for disaster recovery. And the reason why that is so attractive for them is that they can scale it up when they need it.
Sure.
And scale down when they don't need it, right? So they don't have to sit with 100% capacity on idle. So that's a really great use case that's starting to become very, very popular. And then the other one that we're also seeing as a use case is we've launched the AWS P5G service as an edge capability. And we very recently had a fantastic event with DDR Live, who did the Lightning in a Bottle music festival. And they used the AWS P5G to support all of their devices for payment, cameras, security cameras, and security at the venue, connected through the P5G. And it was the ease of deployment of the network, standing it up, running the event, and then afterwards bring it back. That was really very attractive and enabled that use case. So it's great to see these edge use cases really starting to pick up.
I think this is just the beginning. I mean, the use cases, and you mentioned a few that are awesome, but I think we're at the tip of the sword here. There's going to be a ton. Every business is going to find some kind of an edge use case where they could take advantage of this.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So let's go look at the, how do you see customers benefiting from adopting the hybrid cloud strategy? Is there some examples that you can share?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we talk to customers about is IT's job today is to make business and technology indistinguishable. In order to do that, you have to go through a form of digital transformation. So we're in the digital age. If we're in the digital age, then we are in the age of digital opportunity. How does digital opportunity translate into business? Digital opportunity equals data plus insights or analytics. Where is data being generated the most? It's being generated the most at the edge. So we want to empower the business to make near real-time decisions at the edge. And I think that is where organizations need to be focusing on. That's the importance of having this holistic end-to-end hybrid and cloud strategy in order to empower the business to truly take advantage of technology. Hence, the importance of something like this. What about from an AWS perspective?
I actually spoke about this a little bit, but it's still for me such a good example with the Makino milling in Japan. I spoke about it at reInvent last year, but it's such a good example for me where you had a milling factory that produces unbelievable products, and they wanted to modernize their factory to start using automation. Autonomous robots that can move around, move the equipment around in the factory. And they were faced with, in order to do that, they have to build basically a data center that's attached to this factory to be able to do this in very low latency decision making and run all of the software in a local data center, something that they didn't have the skill set to do. So that was all new for them. And wavelength zones became such a great opportunity for them, where they partnered with the wavelength zone and run their application. First, use 5G for the connectivity of these autonomous robots, connecting through 5G into a wavelength zone, which is AWS infrastructure, and they can run their applications in this infrastructure, running it on AWS. So that was just a great example of really cost savings, time to market, and their ability to innovate much faster. Another one was in Liberty in Latin America, right? They've got operations in the Caribbean, and they have to authenticate their users in less than 50 milliseconds to create a lag-free experience for their customers. And so they run in our regions in the US, and they were able to put an outpost down in the islands to operate the authentication process that gave them that experience. So it was a great example of how you leverage almost that continuum of the cloud, running applications in the regions, and where you need the latency sensitive services to run closer to the user, you can put it in an outpost. So those are just two examples.
Oh yeah, those are great examples. I mean, you can see them also on cruise ships. Cruise ships are very popular for this. There's military use cases for things like that as well. The use cases are honestly endless from a customer perspective. Restaurants are doing a lot these days as well. With these types of edge deployments. So we're going to see every industry get disrupted. And those that don't have a good hybrid edge strategy, those are the ones that are going to be left behind to some extent. They're not going to be able to leverage technology to be as competitive. Hence why, for customers that I talk to, I reiterate how important this is to get ahead of the curve.
I so agree with you. I think that it's such an important capability that's available to our customers. So if you think about that, what do you think is important for customers when they are considering the hybrid cloud and edge solutions? What do you think is the most common requirements you hear from customers?
That's a great question. So I think operations for me would probably become at the top. So being able to rely on a partner that empowers them to operate, whether the provider is managing that on-premises or edge infrastructure, or whether the customer is managing it, or whether it's some kind of a hybrid, the customer needs to have the ability to rely on someone. Again, going back to that private cloud example, one of the reasons why private cloud failed is because enterprises cannot operate like cloud providers. So the advantage here is offering them that operational excellence, that operational capability. Support comes into play as well. The partners come into play. But again, if I were to prioritize them, I'd say operations is at the top of that list.
No, absolutely. From our side, we hear very similar things. I think top of the list, we hear our customers asking us that they would like to have consistency for how they think about the applications, building, deploying the applications in the region, in a local zone, in an outpost, and even down to a snow device, right, that is fully disconnected. So that means that our APIs, our tools, our development pipelines should be consistent. And it's the reason why at AWS we took what runs in our regions, and it's the same instances that we've enabled to run in local zones. It's the exact same instances we're allowed to run in on-premise with Outpost. And and I always clarify with customers that when we say fully managed, we truly mean that infrastructure is fully managed. We monitor that server that runs in Outpost on-premise, no different than the server in our region. If we detect any form of issue on that server that we think is customer impact or workload impacting, we'll notify the customer, we'll replace the server. So the customer can really treat that infrastructure as if it is the AWS cloud in the region. So it looks and behaves exactly the same. And then on the, just to touch a little bit on the snow, snow is our fully disconnected solution where if you are disconnected or you have intermittent connectivity to the cloud, so you don't have guaranteed connectivity, how can you run workloads and still leverage the cloud? And what we did with Snow is you can build your entire application in the region, download it onto a Snow device, and then ship the Snow device off to the location where it needs to be used. And it can run then fully disconnected. So still leveraging the cloud, the APIs, the tools, the ability to write the application, to build it, and then send it off. So that is really important. And the last one is, that I think is really important, is we have a global community of trusted consultants, system integrators, the AWS Pro Service, and our 24/7 support. That is just the baseline to say to our customers, wherever you run, right, you have the support from AWS and our partner to run your applications.
I think AI is going to come help too, right?
Yeah. So have you heard anything about AI? Is that something that comes up in your discussions?
Oh, AI comes up everywhere. I'd be curious though, since we brought up AI, generative AI in particular, and I know there's, you're going to ask me about some of the emerging trends, so I'll get a little bit ahead of you. But AI is obviously up there. One of the areas that I'd be curious, and I'm going to ask you the question now, is will we see AI come to AWS Cloud from an operations perspective? Like if I wanted to just ask it to write something for me instead of me trying to figure out cloud formations, can an AI do that for me? This is a very complicated environment, right? It requires deployment at the edge, requires deployment in my on-premises data center. I still have my AWS environment. Can it design an application that's highly available across all of them? Is that too far out, or are we close?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think machine learning, AI, and now generative AI, it's been around for a while, right? We started with machine learning many years ago, moving to AI and now generative AI. So it's not a completely new concept. It's been used in many products. But if I think about the edge, first of all, what we're seeing in the edge is this explosion of data being generated at the edge. And the need to do AI at the edge, is starting to become a reality for us. Today, the best use case would be, when you start running cameras, for instance, at the edge, and you want to do inferencing,
sure,
object detection, and take action on what happens. That kind of inferencing at the edge is here today. We see our customers deploy that, whether it's on an Outpost or a Snow device. That is something that's there today. And then over time, I think you'll see more and more of that capabilities moving deeper into the edge. But you also asked the question, do we, from an operations perspective, right. And at AWS, we've been using AI for some time in terms of just operations. I'll use a use case for you is, imagine you have millions of customers running on the network. How do you know that one single customer has an issue, right? And you don't have to look at the averages. There we use AI extensively in our operations side to help us manage our operations. We also have applications for end users. We announced the availability of Code Whisperer that uses generative AI for developers to be able to write code. So you'll see more of those products coming out where both we and AWS uses AI, but also make it available to our customers. And with Bedrock, How do we, we want to also enable our customers to start using generative AI on their own data sets, working with partners to develop those use cases. So it's definitely, it's a hot topic, and I think I think it's everywhere, and I think it opens up tremendous opportunities for us to leverage it both in operations as well as in new products.
So I'm asking you a couple more questions. So AR, VR is obviously another emerging trend, but one of the things that I'm starting to hear a little bit about is this whole space economy or internet in space. There's a blockchain in space. So if I were to ask you to look at your crystal ball, can we see an outpost in space one day?
Can we see outposts in space? So I've seen a snow in space.
Okay.
And it's actually, you asked that question. It's there was a real use case with NASA where they really had a challenge for, on the International Space Station, they take these extremely high resolution photos constantly. And these are massive big files, image files, that becomes very difficult to download back to Earth. And so the ask was, can we create a device that can go up and use AI inferencing to look at the photos and only send down the information that is relevant and interesting, and then the rest can come down at a later time. So we've deployed that, taking Outposts in there. I don't need a little bit more connectivity to the space station, but I would never say never.
Never say never. That's right. That would be really interesting. Another use case, right? Again, you took the data, you created insights, and they're able to make decisions in near real time based on that.
Well, Eli, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us today. I think the hybrid edge is still in its early phase. We're learning a tremendous amount every day, working with our customers, coming up with unbelievable, interesting, and sometimes challenging use cases that we love working with them to solve. And yeah, we should definitely stay connected as we go down this journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.